About to go live in just a moment.
All right. You all right? I need a minute.
Hello?
Next month, we're gonna have donuts either.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. We have a quorum, and I want to thank everyone for that. We're going to have an incentive donut package, I'm hearing, for next month for our executive committee folks. Good morning. We are going to just roll right into roll call.
Present.
Please wait for your name to be called. No, just kidding.
Charles City County, Mr. Coda. Chesterfield County, Mr. Winslow.
Present.
City of Richmond, Dr. Newbill.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour. Hanover County, Mr. Davis.
Present.
Henrico County, Reverend Nelson. New Kent County, Mrs. Page.
Present.
Powhatan County, Mr. Byerly.
Here.
Town of Ashland, Mr. McGraw. Dr.
Here.
McGraw. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on the meeting minutes? And I want to thank Sid for switching out Mr. Spoonhour and my name on this one. We are, like I said to Mark, we are brothers from another mother and all of that. No, I just wanted to say thank you for that. So moved. I have a motion.
Second, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, old business. We're just going to jump right into office space planning and leasing. You all know this has been an ongoing topic for some time, and we've had some good progress to report. And I'll just hand this over to Martha, who's got a good update for us this morning.
Thank you. If you look in your inboxes for your email, you should have an email from me timestamped last night. So wanted to be able to have that information for you to refer to after the meeting today. We did get a list of 20 properties, candidate properties to do site visits and tours. If you look through that list, you'll notice 9211 Forest Hill Avenue is not, this location is not included on that list. That's because we don't need to schedule a visit to visit the space. So did not want to indicate in any way, shape, or form that it's not a candidate in the potential properties. It just simply doesn't need to be evaluated for visiting. Our task is to condense that list from the 20 candidate properties down to about 7 to 10 to visit. We've tentatively scheduled site visits for the afternoons of October 28th and 29th. We've got a small staff group here, Mr. Parsons being one of the members, Ken Lance on our team, and Dan Mata, who took a thorough look at all 20 of the properties. Myself and Diane Fusco and Mark Bittner also took a look at things. Mark Bittner created a map that I've shared a link with you so that you can kind of see a little bit. Factors that we looked at were proximity to our employees' current residences. Obviously, that can't be a driving factor, but it is something I think worth considering. We also looked at transit and bike accessibility. We do have not only stakeholders, but we also have employees who rely on those modes of transportation to get to work. And so that is definitely an important factor for our team. We looked at affordability. All of the properties in the candidate list are within our range of affordability. Some are just more affordable than others. So that was probably a lens that I applied a little bit more than other staff members, but certainly that was factored in. And then also the surrounding area kind of amenities. And I think I referred to this in the email to you, sort of consistency with urban design and land use practices. So, as an organization that promotes best practices in those spaces, I think we would desire to be in a location that embodies those land use practices. So that was a cut. You have a list of the property in kind of ranked order 1 through 10 of what the staff preference would be. Would love to get your feedback if you have any ideas of properties that are not on that list of 20 that you think we should consider. If you have an opinion about the movement from the 20 to the 10, we definitely would like to have that in. And then thirdly, if you have any desire to participate in the site visits, we would love to have board members join us. So that's kind of the quick, but we're excited to be able to continue to move this ball forward. And the idea would be that really teeing up to your December meetings, we'd start to have some action items in front of you around around this. I should have said, after site visits, the next step would be to invite those that look like they would be a good fit for us to present proposals. So that's really where we would get into evaluating those things like cost. I mean, right now we're looking at what they've listed, which is not always necessarily the most accurate representation of what it would take to get into the building. And I will remind everybody, we are an attractive tenant. We're looking at a longer lease period, so those kinds of things could likely adjust some of the numbers that you would have seen on the listed price per square foot.
Thank you for that. Are there comments? Because we've tried to keep this open, but I did tell Martha it's very important for this body, as we sort of go through all of this, that we have an idea, a strong idea of what staff's preferences are. She knows her people best, and so we need to factor that into the discussion. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. I looked at some of those buildings. We don't have a lot of visitors. I don't consider us and board members visitors, and typically we're used to traveling to go to different locations. So some of the geographical locations are not too much of an issue. I immediately saw the ages of the building, and depending on what was going on inside, I just ancillarily tossed those off, right? So that's probably not going to be the best. And interestingly enough, that some of those rank pretty low as well. Right now in the commercial space, to Martha's point, the sticker price is not necessarily what we're going to even have to consider, and they know that. And we don't know all of the details, but banks right now, particularly on some of these commercial spaces for offices, are allowing the landlords, because they know some of the situations that they're in, to renegotiate some of their loans based on the lease. One of the biggest things that I think we're seeing is tenant upfits are being added into the lease, and that's going to be, I think, huge for us. Those other costs coming in, where before tenant upfit was going to be all on us. So we'll have some of those opportunities, but most of the ones that I looked at that seem to be in a good place for parking, I say central location for board members and then folks to come in, was easy for staff to get in and things like that. We're probably ranked just the way I looked at it last night and earlier this morning. I probably ranked them kind of like staff did as well. But as we get into that, the only thing I would say is that if we're looking at that amount of properties, that we likely can take off a first swath of 7, then we can take off another 3, likely pretty easily. And if it doesn't fit because we've got a lot there, my only suggestion would be that, if it just doesn't seem like it fits and we're kind of hemming and hawing over something, we go ahead and take it off the list so we can, move on it, and then recognize that when we go in, to your point, we're a very desirable tenant, and we have longer lease periods. They know they're going to get their money. They know when we do tenant upfits exactly what they're for, and that works. And at the end of the day, when we ink the deal, those folks know that everything's going to work well for them. So I think that gives us some opportunity to make sure that we're fiscally responsible while getting what we need.
Good comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good comments. Other comments as we go through this, and hopefully everybody did get that. And I'm looking at the screen too, just to make sure I'm paying attention to our folks online. But hopefully everybody did get that packet in the email and is getting a chance to go through that. And Martha, you would like feedback up until the 18th. Is that right? You were hoping to get feedback.
Yeah, I think, certainly if you have major concerns with what you saw, sooner the better, but we want to make sure that this is open, as you said. So if you've got suggestions, and want to participate, we want to make sure that that's open. I mean, so if it's after the 18th, we'll figure out how to fit it in, but I want to make sure that Brian has enough lead time to schedule the visits.
And what is our current per square foot
Cost?
here?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let me follow up and verify. I want to say it's 25 and change, but I want to follow up and verify. It escalates every year, and so I want
I
to
think
make
that's
sure.
about right.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to go down. however you look at it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there
I
was.
think it's
one
like
of the big questions.
$24.75 or something right now.
Yeah.
It's-
It'll go up one more time between now and the lease expiration. And we'll just have it, that at that higher rate for 3 months. But my goal was to come in at a lower per square foot, one, to account for upfit if that's in the margins, but also just to be able to realize savings, not only from a condensed square footage. So you might have also seen the sightline study. We're looking at kind of a space needs of about 10,900 square feet, just under 11,000. We occupy 13,000 right now. So that savings is one opportunity for us. And then also if we can get the dollars per square foot, we negotiated this current space lease at kind of the height of the market. And so we're at a different place in the market now to be able to take advantage of that. So it'd be nice if we didn't get back to this per square foot price for a handful of years. So I'll make sure I send out the actual numbers though, this page, so everybody has that.
That's good. Any other information anybody else needs as well, just pass that on. Well, very
It
good.
might be good that you put it on this list
Yeah.
and make it number 21.
Just as a placeholder.
I mean, good, then you got something to compare to. Because
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
know one of the major issue that brought it up was the amount of money we pay for our rent, our lease, whatever we call it. So we have it on here and we have something to compare.
Okay, I can
Thank you
add
so
that.
much.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else there, we'll just move on to the technology upgrades piece, which I think is right in front of everyone, just been passed out.
Yeah, you had the signature page with the total dollar amount included in your packet, but we did print out, for those of you that are interested in reading the scope, in the technical specs here. This is the selected proposal. This is the proposal we received, I think, 3. Remember, but we received multiple proposals from having a solicitation go out. I think we had a total of 5 vendors who showed up to kind of an information session, got to be here, take a look at what we have and ask questions. Henrico County's audiovisual and media services team helped us with this project just to be able to kind of think through, one, how not to get sold a package that was over designed, but to kind of meet the standards of what we need to do for the various meetings that we host. We talked about this last time. I think Mr. Davis and some others had some questions about kind of the strings attached with VDM. Virginia Department of Emergency Management has approved the use of our $30,000 grant for this project. They've seen the scope of work. They've put it in writing. They've confirmed that they will not usurp our access in the event of an emergency. This is our property and there's no kind of like pullback in the event of an emergency to deploy or anything like that. I would say that the first right of refusal for use of the equipment will always be the Emergency Management Alliance. But they're expecting that the majority of their events will happen on site here. And if we move wherever that is, it would be few and far between if they were to want to relocate the equipment to, say, the Science Museum or something like that for a larger scale event or that kind of thing. So I don't imagine that we're going to be moving this. But interestingly enough, we did briefly talk about this yesterday in the CVTA Finance Committee, and Mr. Peterson suggested that perhaps instead of the CVTA contributing to the cost of the purchase and install of this equipment, perhaps we assign a user fee so that when entities like the CVTA or groups like that want to use this space and benefit from the technology equipment, we assess a fee. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It also would enable us to set up a fee structure that if for some reason the CVTA or the TPO, when it has its forum next month or those kinds of things, want to do something off-site because the location, a different location is more suitable, we could have a tiered fee structure so that there's a fee assessed for the relocation and setup and staff time and all that kind of thing, and or just when it's here and ready to go, which I thought was a great idea. So at this point in time, I mean, when you skip to the back page, the scope is $39,331. The VDM grant will cover $30,000 of that. the PDC cost, as it were, is the remaining balance of the 9,000. I think Finance Committee from CBTA is willing to entertain a proposal, a request, if you will, for cost sharing. And I think that fee schedule, so it wouldn't necessarily be that the CBTA would be reimbursing us for that balance. It would be more that on a use basis, they would be, we'd be adding that on to our billing to them. And I think we could actually do that for any group, and so establishing that fee structure would be great to not only recover the cost, but to be able to support the ongoing maintenance and that kind of thing. So my brain has been kind of turning since yesterday and thinking about that. But I think Mr. Winslow has heard from, but we have definitely at the staff level heard from our partners in the TPO and the CBTA. This is a needed investment to be able to support the virtual attendance, the live streaming. It's a critical component of making sure that the public has access to the meetings that you all are a part of. And so we did go ahead and sign the agreement as soon as we got that green light from VDM. So.
Sure, I just want one question. Yeah, I just want to comment, clarify something. And I don't think the term strings attached is a bad term, but I wanted to know what our obligations were.
Absolutely.
Because I fully support using the VDM grant. I think it's great. So it was, what would the obligations be? And they certainly have a right to have obligations attached to the grant. And then the other thing was the transport or moving of the equipment, just how that was going to be handled, because we're not experts in that. Our staff aren't experts in that. And if they have a plan for that, it sounds like CBTA recognizes that the cost incurred. That was my only concern. If all of a sudden they called and said, let's get it packed up, that, it wasn't going to be me, Martha, and Mr. Winslow trying to load a pickup truck, right? That what's the plan for VDM?
Could be worse.
Right, I guess it could be worse, yeah. But to make sure, because if they need it off-site, then something has happened in which they need it off-site. And I just want to see how much of an obligation we would have to do that. It sounds like we've got that worked out. So I just wanted to kind of clarify some of that. It sounds like it's been clarified. So thank you.
I really like, I'd say, the idea of the fee schedule, because not only will we need maintenance, over time of whatever we purchase, if this is what we decide to do, but, we may want to have a technology fund, sort of in the account that we're always sort of contributing a little bit to over time as the needs of the organization change. It just makes sense to do that, I think. So I think that's great. It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way to create a revenue stream, modest, but.
Mr. Byron.
Exactly. I mean, that's as opposed to the one-time fee or one-time contribution, you gain access to funding regularly as it's used. And then to set up an account where if you need to have maintenance or upgrades throughout a period of time, then you have that contribution that's come in. So I like the user fee idea a lot also.
Other comments? Our folks online are quiet today. All right. Very good. I think that's a great report. And now we have our audit updating schedule under new business.
You'll hear from Mr. Holland in the full commission meeting, but just wanted to share with you that the audit is progressing on schedule. The Finance Committee will review the audited financial statements and the auditor's opinion at their October 26th regular meeting. I did want to just share with you a little bit about what Mr. Winslow and I have been chatting about. So we, from a meeting schedule perspective, the executive committee and the full commission are not planning to meet in November. The regular meeting date is a state holiday. The thought is that if the Finance Committee reviews the audit and the financial statements and the auditor's findings on the 26th, and there is no issue.
No, yeah, it's a clean.
Which at this point in time, we have not received any indication from the auditor that there are any findings or concerns. The recommendation would be that the audit would get distributed to each of you as soon as the Finance Committee has done their review. The full commission, the executive committee, everyone would have a copy of the draft audit, and then it would be scheduled for approval and ratification, as it were, at the December commission meeting. We do have requirements for submission of the audit. And so I think in instances where we need to be able to submit the audit to our state funding partners, we would submit that as a draft audit report pending board approval. just so that it can be kind of in the queue, so to speak. Similarly, the Auditor of Public Accounts, it requires in state code that we submit, and so we would do the same thing, and then we would follow up with the formal submission following. I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware or the executive committee is aware that the deadline for submission to the Auditor of Public Accounts is December 1st. And so there's a bit of a timing issue there. I think that it will be okay, but in talking with Mr. Winslow, I just didn't want that to be an unknown to all of you.
And so the thought was we'd submit this draft pending approval of the body so that we don't miss the deadline and be on the naughty list with the state or any of our other folks who may be looking at that list for funding purposes or what have you. Does anybody have any objection to that? And my understanding, your understanding is clean audit right now. We'll
Yes,
see, obviously.
and confirmed with Dan Van Dorn last night, even that, at this point in time, the auditor has not given any indications. The complete report is due to us Friday, tomorrow. So, we certainly are expecting that there were very few adjusting entries and those kinds of things. So, it's been a smooth process thus far.
I guess the alternative would be to have a November meeting for the purposes of
Yes, certainly.
receiving and approving that.
If there are any concerns that are reported by the auditor, one, I should say, once the report is provided, it does not change. And so, we will be able to notify everyone, particularly those on the executive committee, as soon as the finance committee has the ability to review the report thoroughly. So if by any chance we did need to schedule a meeting, we have ample time to do that. I don't want anybody to read this as though we're, pushing up against some kind of a deadline, but it seemed like if all goes well, all can go well. So.
Right. Any questions or thoughts about that item? All quiet today. All right.
I will just mention that too, for those of you that were active in the conversations last year, we will be at the conclusion of the audit with the current firm. We will be releasing, we have a draft RFP ready to go. And so the intention would be to put that out in the winter months so that we have the results of that selection process teed up for the upcoming fiscal year audit. So I do expect that given the length of time that we've been working with the current audit firm, we will likely have a change. So we'll be pushing that out and going through that process.
Great. And succession management.
Okay, so the last item I have for you is just to give you kind of an update about where things are with our succession management plan. This is a topic that I don't think I've spoken about very much with the executive committee, so I'll give a little bit of background. Last fall, we applied for a grant from Virginia Housing. It was a small capacity building grant, $20,000 to assist with the development of what they call a succession management plan. The idea is that organizations that Virginia Housing funds, which we're a big recipient of funding now from them, they want to make sure that the organization has sort of the structural pieces in place to be a sustainable organization. A lot of times, particularly in the nonprofit sector, they'll fund an organization and then 2 or 3 years later, some aspect implodes and then where are we? So the nice thing is that many PDCs have been able to take advantage of these capacity building dollars. And for us, the focus of the succession management plan is really to be able to hone in on how we can improve our internal processes around professional development and staff retention. So as you know, that's been an Achilles heel for us. The cost of turnover is significant. It's expensive financially, but it's also expensive from a workflow and kind of productivity perspective. And so we've been working with Knowledge Advisory Group. They're a firm that's a pre-approved vendor on the Virginia Housing list, and they've interviewed as of I think the end of July. They've interviewed all of the staff members on our team during that time, including actually the 2 that left this summer. So that was nice to be able to have their input as part of this process. The report will be coming to me in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And so our project will wrap up actually by the end of November, but it will give recommendations around how we can really start to think more comprehensively about what do I want to say? Cross-training. Couldn't think of that word for a moment. The idea of cross-training to make sure that if someone goes on vacation, they do leave to take another opportunity, we've got, kind of the critical workflows covered, but also so that, from I would say morale and kind of employee perspective, it doesn't feel like things are imploding when a member of the team moves on. We're small. So it is, I think, it's fair to say that when anybody leaves, there's a gap. So how do we mitigate that? And then the other part of that is the recruitment and retention piece to really make sure that we're not losing good people for reasons that we can't control. And so I will share with you, and I know Mr. Winslow and other members probably will not be surprised by this, but compensation has come up as a topic of conversation in many of the interviews. That's not, frankly, really the scope of the succession management plan, but the consultants have shared with us that compensation is an issue. Our most recent departures have been in part because of the opportunity to earn quite a bit more in another role. There's also, other factors such as, switching sectors to the private sector and, taking on roles in the state agencies. The state government is actually our biggest competitor. We don't tend to lose people to the private sector as often, and we don't tend to lose people to the localities as often. So I think that that's an interesting factor, and we've lost the majority of the people that we've lost in the last 4 to 5 years have moved on to state agencies, VDOT mostly, which I think in some regards is a compliment, but it's also a bit of a challenge because, we are serving as the training ground for VDOT personnel. And so we want to try to figure out how to deal with that. So more to come on this, but I did want to share that with you. There is a component of this project, the succession management plan, that we'll be asking for your input on. There's a survey that will come out to you in your email. It'll come from Knowledge Advisory Group /SurveyMonkey. So I wanted to let you know to expect it. It's a survey on your perspective on where the organization PlanRVA sits in this notion of the life cycle of organizations. So there's kind of startup, there's maturity, there's turnaround, and where are we kind of on that? And, there's a loop, there's a little, I think, 4-minute video that you can watch to get sort of familiar with the terminology. If you don't watch the video, the survey itself probably takes another 4 minutes. So it's not a long, but we do look for your input on that. It will be helpful, and it evaluates where we are on that life cycle from a governance perspective, from a financial management perspective, from a staff capacity perspective, from a programmatic perspective. So it describes kind of this notion of 4 table legs with a table, and I think it does a nice job of kind of asking some good questions of board members. So
Where is that survey?
it will come out to you. It has not been sent yet, but it'll come from, I think the one I received came from SurveyMonkey. So I want to just alert you, and we'll let you know when it comes out, so you can know to look for it in your spam folders if it gets caught there. But did want to ask that you all consider participating in that. And I think my thought was we would send it to. I guess my question for you is, I think the executive committee, the finance committee are 2 committees that really have a lot of hands-on experience. Would you like me to send it to the entire board, or do you think it would be better for it to be sort of a subgroup of the committees?
Board member have thoughts on that item?
Okay. I'll talk with the folks at Knowledge Advisory Group and we'll let you know. Yeah.
Very good.
So I would like in December, kind of pending the results of this, be able to work with you all. Executive committee serves as the personnel committee, and I definitely would like to be able to begin the conversation with looking at our compensation. I know many of the jurisdictions have also been dealing with this and looking at kind of how do we need to evaluate the pay and classification schedule. Ours is relatively new. I think it was established and kind of firmed up in 2019. Before that, we didn't have one. So we do have that as a starting block, but I think the next step, and we've been working with the HR roundtable on some staffing and compensation comparable projects with the HR roundtable for CBTA. And so it'd be nice if we could work with them on this and be able to bring back recommendations to you for where we need to make adjustments for our staff members to make sure that we can keep that talent here in our midst.
I think certainly in all of our jurisdictions, we've seen the labor market do its thing over the last year and a half, and we're continuing to see that. And so trying to keep talent is very important. And certainly some of us, I think, have been working on adjusting compensation to make sure our own organizations remain competitive. And so this is, probably, right in keeping with that, I think, and would welcome that discussion and whatever data that they have to share with us on that. So I think it's important. One of my former mentors always said, people are policy. And so if we have good people, you have good policy, and that means having good talent and skill sets around the table. So very good.
And turnover in an organization like this is that's tough. I mean, it's tough because there's so much that is homogeneous to this organization. And of course, going to a state agency, I get that. Can you also, I know you kind of touched on the fact that you give us some information and where we are competitively, and that's not so we could be just above baseline and barely make it, but on maybe even a benefit schedule, some of the other things that folks are looking at, whether it's retirement benefits, whether it's fringes, all of those types of things. Put a package together. You want to. Turnover is just that's a killer for something like this. It just is.
I do think, just in talking with staff, I think the benefits structure is another critical component of this, because many staff have communicated to me over the last couple of years that it feels like our benefit structure are geared toward a different demographic than our current staff. And so while we have a pretty rich benefits program, it's not necessarily of value to the people that we, and so that mismatch is, I think, an important component of this, because
and that's why I mentioned fringe, and I'll just give an example, not necessarily on benefit pay, but a gentleman who owned a large distributorship of automobile dealerships. And what he would do is they used to have these, and they talk about how demographics change. But he'd go through the dealership and some of his senior management, general manager, whatever, and they give out these little chits. They call them attaboys. And then at the end of the week, you could spin the wheel, and however many attaboys you had was how many spins you got. Anything from a $25 gift card to a day off, and then a real small piece of the pie was a paid day off. Well, his demographic had gotten in his dealership. They didn't care whether it was paid or not, but he had to increase the size of the pie on the day off. It just, when I came up, anything you could do to get extra money, and they were, and so I'm not saying that we structured around this particular one, and, one example, but they did realize that some certain things had changed that were not real. Some folks coming in are not looking at their 401ks as much as maybe, some other generational folks. They will later on, right? But if we could put that together and look at some of those things. The other point I bring up too, and this is not to sound negative or whatever, but oftentimes, and we've done it in Hanover and I've done it in the private sector, is to send out, they used to call it propaganda books, but to remind employees of the benefits every year that they do have. And that's not to say, hey, you should be thankful, but to say, hey, these are some of the things that we have. If we don't have it right, or there's different things that you're looking at, let us know. There's a cost incurred with this. In Hanover, we tell folks every year we want to provide, the healthcare and so on and so forth. But that was our largest increase. And as we got in front of that and said, look, we anticipate another health insurance increase. It's important for us to make sure that we maintain this health program and whatever. It eased some of the tension. At least they knew kind of where the boss was coming from. He wasn't just saying, hey, you can't do anything this year. Health insurance went up. The reason it went up, we explained what we were told, from the carriers, but we did provide that feedback, and not that it always assuages everything, but they kind of knew what was going on and said, okay, I get this. And, so when you do go in, your copays are going to stay the same, where you have these different plans and there's a cost. So if we add all that together, but I think, Martha, you've got your finger on the pulse. There's some things that we may be able to provide that may be cost neutral, that provide a little bit more relevance to the benefits. And that's why I mentioned fringe. So if we get that entire package,
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, when you work with the government, we're still rather sterile when it comes to certain things in the employment world, right? Because that's just the way the government is used to operating. Cinder block walls, gray paint, and come in, punch the clock kind of thing. And these are the same employees that they're going to leave for different places like that. We want to make sure. And again, in an organization like this, turnover is it's awful. I mean, it really hurts. You just getting somebody spun up, particularly somebody who has institutional knowledge. It's just very, very difficult. It's difficult on leadership team too.
That's good. Good.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bynum?
What is the number of staff? What's the total number of employees here?
We're at 22 people right now. We have 3 vacancies, so we'll be at 25 at full approved positions. Yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of variability there with part-time, if we have a summer intern or something like that. But yeah, 25 is our kind of core. So, and that's a growth from, we were as low as 19. So the new positions that were approved this summer, kind of moved us into a different bracket.
Having been in the small business arena, it is very challenging when you lose somebody. It's extremely challenging. But I think it's good to know that from what you're saying, where they're going, and you're becoming that training or the training facility for them. It's hard to measure what the real cost is. So when it comes to payroll and how much you're going to pay somebody to try to retain, because money will become a factor. And I know Mr. Davis's comments with the car business, the attaboys, and in different generations, I would agree with Mr. Davis completely. I was the money is what I wanted, and that's why I went to work every day. And now socioeconomically it's changed, and the time off becomes more prevalent to some people as compared to money. But to know what that is, so as I sit listening to that conversation, the survey that you're talking about sending out, maybe the survey should be in-house within the staff.
They will be completing it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anonymously. So
yes.
That they can.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I should have said, I will say, Knowledge Advisory Group does this kind of work all over the state. They're here locally, but they do a lot of nonprofit work. So I think, and Chuck can verify this, but I think that they were very impressed with how many of our staff members love their jobs. So it is interesting, and I think just because the news and we're all facing this, the world pretty drastically changed in the last 2 years, and our staff, as much as anyone, have had to adapt and all of that. And so, I think that it's a timely opportunity to be able to take advantage of these findings and these conversations with our staff, because their priorities could have shifted.
Absolutely.
And so depending on what's going on in their household and, some other things, I think being tuned into that is going to be one of the key things. And I think our staff members have, because we're small, they have insights that will be very productive for us. And it's a matter of figuring out how to put into place what they're suggesting. So I don't think that any of our staff members are asking for the moon. I think that they're all just really good, solid people who love what they do, love this community in this region, love their work, and we just need to compensate them. And that's it's kind of that simple, quite frankly.
I would agree. And I think you're probably rewarding them by virtue of including them into the process, that their opinions, we value.
And I think financially, we're in a position finally to be able to think about this. 2 years ago, we weren't there. We are there now. And so I think the staff have worked incredibly hard to make that progress and to make that turn. And I want to make sure that they see the rewards of that effort that they've done to be able to, not do or not benefit from certain things during this time, and try to really make sure that the successes of the agency are realized by them.
So I have some. So of course my wheels are just turning. So my question is, and it's, I know outside of the box, thank you, but we have 25 people. Do they ever see the results of their hard work? And has the board itself ever done an appreciation to meet the staff? I mean, you have people working that, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know who's with TPO. I don't know who's with PlanRVA. I mean, a lot of people think that Shed works for you. They don't know that those are two separate things, two separate organizations. See what I'm saying? They don't realize that he's a director as well. So do we ever do anything do we have a breakfast appreciation and bring in the staff with the board? You know, do we ever acknowledge how much we absolutely appreciate you? I think that, of course, it's not going to replace increased salaries, but by the same token, just to know that, hey, other people see me, they see what I'm doing, they appreciate it. If it's a feel-good moment for a week, oh well, you know, but at least we have stepped outside and said, hey, it's good to meet you. Hey, what do you do? You know, because if you love your job, nothing matters more than to know that somebody's interested in what you do.
I don't think that there could ever be too much opportunity to connect with board members and for our staff to be able to hear that support and feedback from board members. I would say prior to the pandemic, we had more activities like that. During the pandemic, we did do some cookouts. Mr. Spoonhauer came. Mr. Spoonhauer actually took 2 different groups of our staff out to lunch and, you know, did just that. I think one was actually virtual because we couldn't go to a restaurant, but those kinds of things have happened less in the last 24 months, but the board is always welcome to our holiday party. And I would love to think through, and we do have board members. I should say Mr. Thornton has been phenomenal in coming and walking the halls, even during this time, to say thanks. And we do have board members who do stop by and do walk down the halls and say hello and say thank you, or after a meeting, you know, come and see who's here. So it happens. I do not want to discourage anybody from doing that more. And if there are opportunities that I'm missing to be able to put staff in front of you more often, I'd love to do that. So I think you're spot on. People who love their job like that kind of thing. And it's not a replacement for compensation, but it sure does make it really nice. And I think it's been hard on our team, as it has been for everybody, to be sitting at a computer screen all day. I mean, that's not how our team is used to functioning. And we're getting back to sort of being able to do a lot of those things. And so if board members want to participate in that, that would be thrilling.
I just think that we need to set aside time to do that.
Ms. Page,
Absolutely.
excellent comments. And I think we need to incorporate, well, you and I can chat.
That'd be great.
We'll get something on the calendar for an appreciation event of some kind.
Absolutely.
Or events with an S. It is 9:00. And so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this and give everybody an opportunity to get settled in for the regular meeting.